instead of silencing Charlie Kirk once he died, if all we do is hold memorial services, uh, we let them succeed. We we let them shut him up. And so, if what we're trying to do succeeds, we will have 10,000 more Charlie Kirks, 10,000 young people who will rise up and actually carry forward his legacy and continue to do what he did in his stead.
Welcome to Insights, the podcast of Forerunners of America, where we are here every time to warn the nation from a biblical perspective and to help you respond in faith. And I'm very excited about today's podcast, which we're focusing on Charlie Kirk seizing the moment and the younger generation. I'm very excited about this because it's going to be pretty heavy on the responding in faith side of what we give on these podcasts. And to help me do this, or maybe I'm here to help him do it, but we're going to help you respond in faith today. And my guest is Marcus Schroeder. So welcome, Marcus.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I don't know how much we're going to get into Marcus's past, but he has really stepped out in faith and done some great things for God at personal sacrifice, etc. But we're really here more to talk about what's going on right now, as well as where God is leading Marcus in ministry with a new organization that we'll get to here shortly. So, Marcus, let's talk about Charlie Kirk here a little bit. He was assassinated on September 10th, and we're doing this podcast about a month after the fact. But what are some things that you really appreciate about him? I'd like us to talk about this for a minute because he was such a unique individual.
Yeah, he really was. And I mean, nobody can doubt that anymore, seeing the response, the national response that the nation has had after witnessing his assassination and his martyrdom. And I think that the main thing that I took away, man, there were just so many emotions that were going through my mind and my heart at that time, especially being a recent father, hearing that he had two little children. He has, I believe, a 3-year-old daughter and a 1.5-year-old son. And my son is like 5 months old. And so they're not that far apart. And I'm just like, it just struck me like, how would a woman like Erica tell her children that their dad's never coming home? And I was trying to think through that, and so there was just so many things about him that I appreciated. So many things, I think, especially with the Gen Z, the younger generation, which he really reached out to, doing all the campus ministry that he would do, and going out to college campuses on the ground, that really like impacted us in a spiritual way and a very deep way. I think if I were to draw out maybe 3 main things I really appreciated about him, I think the first was his courage. His courage to be able to go out there and sacrifice day after day, hour after hour, talking to people that he disagreed with, people who would spit in his face, give him death threats, and regardless of whatever pushback he gave, he believed in the hope and the truth of his message, that he actually had the courage to step out in faith, like you talk about, and reach the other side and try to be a good witness to them and talk through the issues, our political issues and our spiritual issues as a nation. So I think his courage was the first one. The second one was his hard work ethic. That's been really inspiring to me. Like even some of the stories that have come out from people who knew him at his memorial and whatnot, as they were talking about his work ethic from like 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. at night, working on this because he believed in the future of his nation. He wanted to leave an inheritance to his children of a nation, a Christian nation, a nation that they could be raised in and actually call home, like a nation that would not devolve into a communist totalitarian state. And he wanted to protect our nation from going there. And so his work ethic, because of the mission he believed in, and just being able to grind out like that and be able to very, very much so a Protestant work ethic, something that we've lost in America that he still had, was super inspiring to me. And then the third thing was his family life, and encouraging other people. An interview that he was in that really struck me once was he talked about, he was asked what was his number one advice that he would give to young people. And he said, get married young and have a lot of kids. And I just thought that was so important. It even when you're not Christian, there's something about having family that orients you to looking into the spiritual life, taking life as more valuable. You're living for a cause greater than yourself. That you realize, you know what, when you see the miracle of birth and you see these children come into the world, there has to be a God. I don't know how you see that miracle of of a little baby, um, and not believe in God, not believe in the God of Scripture, and in a loving God who created this universe with purpose. And so I think there's something, just so powerful about recovering the American family that we've lost as a nation right now, that really inspired to me. But he wasn't a just political talking head where he was like, hey, these are good ideas and I think this is what's best for our nation. He actually went and lived it. He got married, he had kids. And the way Erica has talked about him afterwards and talking about how great of a husband he was, not only did he have this great work ethic and was on this mission, but every week he would check in with her and be like, how can I serve you better as your husband? How can I raise our children better? That he actually, somehow was able to do everything he did, travel the nation, and still raise a family and invest into his wife well and have a strong relationship there. It was just really an inspiration to me on so many accounts, but I think those are the three main ones.
Yeah, that last one there. How many of us know people that have been driven and on a mission and a huge goal like Charlie Kirk, but at the same time, he could have done a marriage seminar for people that needed help with marriage and family. I mean, just what a heart. And I would like to add a few things. I mean, I just love his heart in terms of he obviously disagreed with people on so many topics. At the center of many of those were biblical truths that he disagreed, meaning he was bringing forth the biblical truths while others were disagreeing with him. But he wouldn't hold that personally or wouldn't get angry. He would essentially respond in graciousness and in logic. And sure, some of those debates get a little bit heated at times. I think that's true for everybody. But off the stage, off the camera, he would say, people are deceived. We need to help them. Or people have had hurts in their past and they have a reason for being this way. We need to help them. And he didn't take this stuff personally, and he really wanted to help people more than just try to win an argument. I would also say that he did a great service to our country and specifically to the body of Christ because he got the conversation started on so many things. And as you know, I did campus ministry for many years of my life before starting Forerunners of America in 2014. And in that campus ministry, I noticed there were just a lot of things that you did not talk about publicly out on campus because they were taboo. And it's sort of similar topics, often sadly, within our church, where we talk about these things in hushed tones in the hallway, whether it's hushed tones in the hallway at church, after church, or on a college campus. And Charlie Kirk brought it all out, all these uncomfortable topics, whether should we be married young and have children? Should abortion be legalized, LGBTQ, focus on, of course, more recently, everybody has been on transgenderism. The point being is that finally we could bring this out and just talk about it. And even though he passed away about a month ago, it's exciting to think that we are the ones that now can continue this conversation and not retreat and not put it in the background. And it is interesting, though, and I think I would be remiss if I didn't include this, is that Jesus kept telling the truth till he died on the cross. Charlie Kirk kept telling the truth until he died. And there's front and center for me, there has been this question. So what about you, Dave? Telling the truth until you pay the ultimate sacrifice. And by the way, that's a biblical theme. It's not just Jesus' example, as important as that is, or Charlie Kirk's example, as important as that is, but it's for all Christians. Have we truly surrendered? So lots to appreciate about him and learn from him and carry with us into the future. And that's actually connected to the next part of this podcast. So Marcus, you've got something very specific on your heart that kind of dovetails with what we're just talking about in terms of Turning Point USA and what they were moving into. And you want to launch something So go ahead and let's jump into this and tell us first, what's your idea? And then, of course, I got some follow-up questions.
Yeah, of course. So after it was really inspired by Charlie Kirk, his death, this moment that I think we're in as a nation. And I think that this is the time where we press forward further. I think a lot of conservatives, I mean, even the nature of our name is conservative. So we're trying to conserve the past in some sense is kind of what it implies. Part of the issue with that, one of our downfalls can be as soon as we have a victory, like, okay, we get transgenderism banned at the federal level, or we see a national revival, it's like, okay, we won. And we just kind of sit back like, all right, cool, we got a Republican president and we're good now for 4 years. And that's not the case. This is the moment to like push forward. And so I found myself asking, what am I going to do in this moment? And I had a lot of young people calling me up and asking, I've been really touched by this moment. I want to do something to help save my nation. And I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go, how to get plugged in, what I can do actually practically on the ground that isn't just trying to vote for the next president in the next 4 years. Like, what's something I can do in the meantime to actually have a real impact in my community? And I was like, I kind of looked around and there isn't a lot out there. So what we're doing is we're going to launch an organization. There's 3 founding members, myself included. And the purpose of it is I want to build something that young people can actually get plugged into and do real hands-on work in the political scene at the ground level in their county, in their local communities. And so what we're going to do is we're going to train, equip, and give the resources needed, and then launch young people into fighting in the culture war, fighting in the political scene, and launch local chapters where they get to go out and do change my mind tables on college campuses. We're going to train them to go out and speak before their county board and their city council and their school board. To boil it down, what we're really wanting to build is raising up 10,000 more Charlie Kirks. We want to give young people the resources necessary that they get to go out and do what Charlie Kirk did. They get to go out and talk to the other side, defend these ideas, defend hope and truth and Christian values and the Christian faith. And that's what we're trying to do so that every college campus there is, they walk out and instead of silencing Charlie Kirk once he died, if all we do is hold memorial services, we let them succeed. We let them shut him up. And so if what we're trying to do succeeds, we will have 10,000 more Charlie Kirks, 10,000 young people who will rise up and actually carry forward his legacy and continue to do what he did in his stead.
Mm-hmm. And in a sense, and I don't want to be overly dramatic here, but in a sense, if we don't step up now, seize the moment, we're not only failing the legacy of Charlie Kirk, but I actually feel like we're failing the Lord. Like the Lord is calling us. Like I believe He's given us this moment. And to squander moments like this is where too often it's happened in the past where we didn't take that next step to really believe God for what He can do next. So I need to back up just a little bit though, because you're talking about the younger generation, your generation, let's say, within 5 years younger than you and maybe 5 or 10 years older than you, but that general age group, you said they want to save the nation. Okay, what do they see that our nation needs to be saved from?
It's hard to know where to start. There's so many things. I think the best way to summarize it is to say that we are really at the brink of civilizational collapse. If you look at any nation in history that have crossed the lines that we have, of sexual degeneracy, homosexuality, abortion, transgenderism, even the amount of illegal immigration is, very similar to Rome in regards to all the various foreign groups that were coming into Rome in its latter days. Anytime a nation has crossed these certain kinds of lines, even our birth rates being below replacement level, it's a sobering reality that when you look at history, any nation that's crossed these lines, very few of them, if any at all, have actually recovered as a nation and as a civilization. And there's actually a really good book by Carl Zimmerman called Family and Civilization, where he kind of draws a direct line between your family values, your birth rates, and the strength of your civilization. And as soon as you see families start going down and birth rates start going down and family values of people even wanting to have families, and what Charlie Kirk said, encouraging young people to actually have families, the reason he had to do that is because most young people aren't. With the feminist movement and so many of the sexual demoralization that's happened across our nation, they're not starting families, they're not having children, and the result of that is our civilization is weakening and it's about to collapse.
On that, there's also been a heavy emphasis for many, many years, decades, about career and goals, and really a lot of things that are just simply supported by materialism, that this is what life is all about. And it's very much a temporal view of everything. Now, what a huge shift we've had, because it wasn't that long ago in America where everything was about having your own kids and having your family and the love and the joy that comes from that. Of course, many challenges too. But talk about the shift. We've gone from that to now, basically, I want to please myself. I want to achieve things in career, financially, or sometimes it's just having an entertainment-based life where we go from one form of entertainment to the next. And so, I mean, it's just such a different thing. And yes, we absolutely need this message that Charlie Kirk was good at. I'm grateful that you're going to raise up, see the Lord raise up 10,000 people to carry these messages, but be fruitful and multiply, have family. This is where so much joy comes from, and it glorifies God.
That's right. Yeah, and a comparison I like to make is, have you seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life?
Yeah.
That is, I think, such a stark contrast of what we see in our nation right now, the culture that's depicted in there. And I contrast that with the movie Frozen, with Elsa, the popular kids Disney movie. And I think really the old America, as I refer to it, its number one value was sacrificing the individual, sacrificing yourself for your family and for Christ, sacrificing. I mean, that's really the Christian message that America was built on. Christ said, "If any man wants to follow me, he must pick up his cross, deny himself, and he must sacrifice himself and be crucified with me, so he can be risen with me as well." And that was the message that America was built off of. And then the message of the new America, the nation that we're living in right now, is sacrifice the family, sacrifice religion, sacrifice tradition, sacrifice all these other things to serve yourself. It's the inverse. And so when you compare those two movies, I think they're actually really good examples of the two different cultures. The first, It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey, he sacrificed his goal of going and seeing the world for having a family, having children, actually supporting his local community, standing for what was right in his town. And you see that it was a wonderful life for him. It was actually brought so much more fulfillment to him than had he went out and lived his personal, materialistic, individualistic goals, as you mentioned. And then you see Elsa, who had a sister and whatnot in Frozen, and she does the opposite. She sacrifices her family to go live by herself in the mountains and build this like whole ice kingdom. Those two movies, I think, really show the depiction of where we've gone in a nation. Really, what we need to get back to is that first, the old America.
Mm-hmm. We want to be careful about, going backwards, because the Lord always has things for us to go forward in that we need to pursue as well, that maybe America in that previous generation did not experience, but there's more that the Lord has for us. But that we could talk about that another time. But I just want to ask you then, so obviously we're both very impressed with and honoring Charlie Kirk, but it seems to me that before Charlie Kirk and all of the Turning Point USA were an influence in your life, which is helping you to launch this new organization. And by the way, what's it called?
The American Futurists.
Yes, the American Futurist. You must have had other influences in your life that have brought you to have these convictions. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely.
Like where else did you? Who shaped you and how?
Yeah, my parents are the primary ones. I was never sent to public school, so that helps. Homeschooled most of my life, given a Christian education, raised in the church, and so my parents would be the first. Also, different pastors I've had over time, um, and and even my father-in-law now, I would say, would probably be my three main influences that have really helped shape me.
Hmm. Wow. That's good. That's instructive just in and of itself for you to share that briefly. So, okay, so going back to this new movement, let's call it this new organization ministry, the American Futurists, it caught my attention when you threw that out to me the first time, that title, that, uh, you know, the ministry that God called my wife and I to start as Forerunners of America. Well, a forerunner by definition, it comes before something else, and most forerunners see or at least have an idea of what's coming, and they're part of that forerunner mission. Like John the Baptist was a forerunner for Jesus' public ministry, and so forerunners come before something else. And so a futurist, if I'm following you right, they're looking at what's happening now, just like a forerunner would, and they're looking at the future, and they're saying, now, wait a second here, if we continue on this path, then this is going to happen. If we can make these changes, then something else is going to happen. Is that the idea of being an American futurist?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, what I said earlier about going back to the values of like what was depicted in It's a Wonderful Life, I think you did properly point out that there are dangers to just wanting to go back to the past. Like that's not what God has something for us in the future. But at the same time, I think, what I was trying to mention with that is we want to learn from the good things that our fathers did, and replicate that, and then learn from the bad things that they did and avoid those. And so I do think there's something to be recovered there. But the reason I titled the organization that is, I want us to be focused, like you said, on the future and not just trying to go back to a time of the past. There is something that I believe God has for America. I think He's shown us immense grace over the last few years, even with the change of direction of our nation, even like the national revival we're seeing after Charlie Kirk's death, and the people going back to church and the people wanting to embrace those values again. I think we need to be focused on changing the future of the nation and believing that what we do today actually impacts the future of tomorrow. What I do today in my nation to impact my nation is going to impact what kind of nation my children, my grandchildren grow up in.
Hmm. Yeah, so I wrote about this fairly extensively in the book that was published last year called To Contend, America's Conflict with God and What to Do. And I first put the onus on us is that we're in conflict with God. Obviously, we have all these other things, like you referred to, culture wars and all this stuff that's being thrown at us that's anti-biblical. But first and foremost, I talk about that we have to submit ourselves to Christ. We have to repent and see that begin within the church and then go outside the church. And so I talk about that first battlefront is really right within us, within our own hearts and within the church. And then secondly, we want to make a difference in our communities. And then third, we want to make a difference in terms of righteousness being in government. And so just in light of what you see, where you're going with the American futurists, the 10,000 that you're believing God to raise up, like, can you comment on those three areas, like the difference that they would make? If you don't want to cover the church area, that's fine. We've done that many times on this podcast, but like, especially in our communities, which I'm assuming includes the college campuses, and then also making a difference within the government sphere.
Yeah, I believe there is a really important aspect to being involved in local church, being involved in your local community. And I think the important aspect of that, with us launching this, being a grassroots movement where we would have chapters involved in that arena, is the importance of that is politics far too often becomes impersonal. It becomes something we do over Twitter, keyboard war, and we're kind of focused on the national scale and whatever the media tells us about the next presidential election. When you get involved in politics in your actual local community, you're dealing with flesh and blood. You're dealing with other souls, other human beings, and you actually have to come face to face with them and have an interaction with them. And the goodness of that is when you actually start to make a difference in your community, you're actually impacting other people for good in your community. That is fulfilling really the second greatest commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself. So if we criminalize abortion in our local community, we're loving our local neighbors. And there's something good about that that's, I think, even far better than just worried about whoever the next president's going to be. So yeah, I definitely want us to be involved in that arena. I think the changing hearts and minds on college campuses is a big thing that I want to be a part of. Um, Doing the tables that Charlie Kirk would do, and then also being involved in helping get senators elected, people at the local level, the county level, and then once that builds out across the nation, uh, there's real voice that can be had where we can speak our voice to the national scale as well. I do believe that's important at the national scale, but I think it should start in being involved at the local community because those are the real people that you can impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think in all of these areas, well, once the church has the plumb line straight and we're surrendered to Christ, walking in faith with Him as a community in the church, well, then the community is going to be affected. And it's this point where we really become salt and light in the community. And I really believe what you're describing is what Jesus intended when He said salt and light. And then that's your local community. And of course, local government, state government, federal government. Jesus, it seems like we've interpreted this to mean that Jesus said, be the salt of the earth and light of the world, except for in government. And that has left us where we are today, where we have handed over the keys of the kingdom to some of the most depraved people, lost people, people that shouldn't be running the local dog pound, much less their whole state or country or being in the Senate or the legislature, whatever. So it's vital that we're taking this seriously from a biblical perspective. This is all about being salt and light. Obviously, you and your two friends, you have a huge vision. So how are you going to go about these first steps? The first lap around the track is the hardest, and then you build momentum from there. But do you see yourselves seeing the first American futurists raised up and start to become of this coalition? I mean, before we get to 50 states, you need to get to one state. Right. So how are you going to begin this?
Yeah, there's I think a good moment right now where, like I mentioned before, all these young people want to be involved in something. So I've been making phone calls over the last 2 weeks to a bunch of people, and I've yet to have a single person who hears my idea and is like, oh, never mind, I don't want anything. Like every phone call I make, they're super passionate about it. They want to be involved. They think it's awesome. And so I think the best way to start this is start at the local level. We're going to have a chapter starting in Kansas and then one shortly thereafter in Wisconsin from a few connections I have up there. And I think it's going to spread primarily through word of mouth at first. I have several dozen young people who want to be involved right now. And then as that gets involved, they tell their friends about it, and then word gets out, and more people will get involved and in that arena. But something that's really been a blessing for me as well, just with some of the things in my past, with the national scale attention I got with taking a stand at the Drag Queen Story Hour in Watertown. There's just been a lot of really good connections I've been able to make that I'm going to, be working alongside with to help get this off the ground.
Yeah, very exciting. And so, whether you have, like, say, in a year, whether you have a few dozen futurists that are out giving this message to wherever they live, wherever they are, wherever they go to school, or at some point, you have seen the whole vision come into place where 10,000 people are really proclaiming Christ and truth on every cultural topic and all these kinds of things. Like, how will you spool these people up, so to speak, like give them the training and whatever, just the education even to what they're going to need? Like, how is that going to be delivered to all these new people joining your movement?
Yeah, I've had a little bit of experience with this, and some of the connections I have had a lot more experience with it as well. Where when I ran my previous organization, Warriors for Christ, we would do training sessions like this, like what I have in mind, where we would teach them apologetics, we'd teach them debate. I don't know if you've heard of the book Tactics by Gregory Kokel, but it's a fantastic book on how to ask questions to get people to start thinking about their worldview. So teaching them things like that, how to ask good questions, how to go out onto the college campus, and when when all these people get fired up and they're angry at you because you believe something crazy like there's only two genders or something like that. Well, how do you reply to them? Well, far more often than not, the best way is to ask them a question and be like, "Oh, so you don't believe that there's two genders? Can you explain this?" And if you know how to ask the right questions of them, one, it shows that you care about them, the person you're talking to. They realize you're not just there to lecture them, that you actually want to hear what they have to say. And two, they actually have to come up with something to defend their own position, and it makes them have to think about, oh, why do I believe this? Why do I believe there's 100 plus genders? And Lord willing, if the Spirit works in their hearts, through just showing them what they believe and having them have to say it themselves, they see the absurdity of it, and you can present the Christian worldview as the alternative option that actually, believe it or not, makes coherent sense of the world around us. So I think the primary thing will be showing them how to understand the main arguments for what we believe, but then first and foremost, learning how to ask good questions of the other side to make them think. So we can go to town, anytime. I just took a trip up to Wisconsin to meet with the people up there who are wanting to be involved. And what I'm thinking of doing is we're going to, if there's someone who wants to launch a chapter, we'll have some requirements and, want to vet the person and things like that. But then once we come to town, we can come in and give them trainings, have training sessions in the night, where we'll have people speak, talk about these topics, talk about how to ask good questions and debate and things like that. And then during the day, I would want to actually take them out to the college campuses, take them out to their state capital and do it with them firsthand, so they actually get some experience under their belt. And then we're not just going to leave them like that. We'll stay in touch with them and see how things are going and kind of disciple them as they move forward.
Yeah, excellent. That's what it's going to take to not only grow but sustain this movement. And so, very good. So, do you have a website?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, when you do get it, we're going to add it to the description of this podcast. So all of the listeners, you can come back to this particular podcast and just look in the description. And when Marcus and his group has a website, we will have it posted there. So with that said, though, I don't want to pass over something that you said a little bit ago that was very important. And I know it's related to what your vision is, and it also has a connection with Charlie Kirk's ministry, Turning Point USA. And that is that you're not only, of course, trying to persuade people, convince people, help people change their minds and invite them to change your mind, all that stuff. But there's this relational component that's here. And just a minute ago, Marcus, you mentioned about, it's not like just these keyboard warriors hiding in their basement, just blasting these intense messages out, to whoever on social media or wherever. But this is actually real people connecting. And that is a shift in culture that I've seen in my lifetime. So I remember when culture was largely built by relationships. It rested upon relationships, friendships, and even people you didn't disagree with, you could still talk to. And things have become so polarized that now it seems like we aren't concerned about anybody's feelings or relationship. In fact, there was even a sizable part of the political left that was mocking Charlie Kirk after he died. And they said he brought this on himself. So rather than seeing any kind of relational connection or any grieving or anything, it was just simply a cold rejection of him as a person. But what's at the center of what you're doing is trying to do what Charlie Kirk did and actually meet people and have relationships. So talk into that at all that you'd want to, but I'm just curious, have you seen this shift even during your life, younger than me, obviously, but have you seen a shift even during your life that has moved us out of relationships?
Honestly, from, I was born in 2003. So I was kind of raised up in this technological world. So I think a lot of that had already happened. I think I've actually seen it the opposite direction. I think the shift has been really good over the last few years. I mean, by the time I started kind of paying attention to politics, it was, I paid attention a little bit before this, but the big thing was COVID in 2020. And we went from COVID, tyrannical lockdowns, churches not worshiping anymore, riots in the streets, our statues being torn down, and our cities being burnt down and looted, and riots going on in the middle of our nation, to all of a sudden where we're at now, where political leaders, whether they believed it personally or not, were preaching the gospel from a worldwide stage with millions of people watching after Charlie Kirk's death. And so I think really that shift has taken place. And I think with the left, um, I do think that there's a lot of things that have become impersonalized with social media, and I think that's why Charlie Kirk was so impactful. I mean, even other talking figures like Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles, and some of the Daily Wire guys, and people like them. I think they have a lot of good work that they're doing, but primarily they do stuff online. They do podcasts. They do stuff online. I think what made Charlie Kirk such uh, a massive impact, he had such a massive impact upon this generation, was the fact that he actually left social media and he went out to have face-to-face conversations with people. I think that's why you're seeing the impact that he had. If he had just been on social media, if he had just been on Instagram saying the exact same things and then was killed, you would not see what's going on right now at all. People would not care nearly as much because it's impersonalized. Nobody really cares about a profile behind a screen that says some words. They care about real human interaction. So I do think that it's definitely been something that our nation has faced, is the impersonalization of our culture. But I think that's shifting, and I think that's a good thing.
Do you believe that there is a growing percentage in your generation of people that care about things like this? And let me just frame this. When I was growing up, late teens, going on into my 20s, I don't really know hardly anybody that was thinking the way you're talking, what you're describing, having a vision like you. I don't think we saw America in danger or in trouble. We just assumed that we were, a superpower and things were fine and we enjoyed living our lives. And this kind of thing was not on our radar, but obviously it is on yours. And I'm just simply asking, is that the number of people within this group in your generation, do you feel like it's actually growing?
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
And what makes you think that?
I think there's a couple things that have caused it. Like I mentioned, 2020, the devil really overplayed his hand, is I think the best way to say it. Where he could pacify the younger generation in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, because things were going pretty bad, at least spiritually, but it felt like things were good. It felt like the culture was fine, and then he overplayed his hand, where now you have people advocating for kids' genitals to be chopped off. You had the riots in 2020. You had drag queens dancing in front of children. And anybody who even has some sort of heart in them, even the smallest amount of natural revelation, even the smallest amount of a conscience given to them by God, they've seen those things and they're like, hey, we should do something about this. This has crossed the line. And so I think that's what's caused it. I definitely think the evidence of that is the hundreds of thousands of people after Charlie Kirk's death. Even some of the statistics from the polls right now, this is the most conservative generation there has been, probably over a century. And so I think there's, a lot of different things that point to that and are evidence of that. But I think those are the causes why.
Well, I really appreciate that this generation is waking up, because my generation, I hate to even say this, and I know this is being recorded, so I hate to say this all the more, but it has been unbelievable to me, even within the church. So underscore that. Even within the church, how we have accommodated things that are crazy and they're anti-biblical, therefore they're anti-God, therefore God's opinion on all this is immorality. The biblical word is wickedness. But we have been slow to even call out transgenderism. This is a biblical, it's antithetical to the Bible to change genders. It's also antithetical to science. It's also antithetical to natural law or just common sense. And what have we done? Almost nothing. But your generation and what you're describing is you see it, and it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, it does matter to me in a sense, but whether you're getting that information from natural law, you just observe things and go, that is not how things work. Boys do not become girls. Girls do not become boys. We don't get surgeries. We don't want lifelong hormone therapy, et cetera, et cetera. you just figure it out through natural law. Or you look at the Bible and say, yep, it's absolutely wrong. Or you look at the science, which for me anyway, what I've looked at, it's very clear that nobody's changing their gender, even if they do go through hormone therapy and they get sex reassignment surgery. So encouraging, however your generation is figuring this out, so encouraging that they're figuring it out. And if what you're saying is true, and Marcus, I have a tendency to believe you, but that means that there's something much better going on right now in the, let's just say, 15 to 30-year-olds than what's gone on in my generation. So very, very encouraging.
I think it's funny too. I definitely think God has a sense of humor with it, because when you look at the things that you mentioned about the church kind of going towards the left and trying to appeal to the left so that they don't lose people giving tithes to their congregation so they can build bigger churches and be seeker sensitive. The humor of this is they wanted to appeal to the culture to get as many people as possible in. And so they felt like they had to appeal to the left because the culture was so leftist not that long ago. And now the culture is swinging hard to the right. And after Charlie Kirk's death, you see, I've heard of church after church after church across America absolutely packed after his death, where people are like, I'm going to go to the church again. I haven't gone in years, but Charlie Kirk's death, it inspired me to go to church again. And guess what? They're not going to the leftist churches. And so I think it's really a sense of humor that the leftist churches try to appeal to the culture and become more leftist to get as many people. And now it's just going to backfire on them. So I definitely think God has a sense of humor with that. And it's, I think the moral takeaway, the lesson here is you don't bow to the culture no matter where it is. And when you have courage, you're actually going to appeal to more people who are actually going to be, in line with Christian thinking. You're actually going to appeal to the right kind of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the liberal churches, as the axiom goes, you believe in everything, you end up believing in nothing, and that's exactly the path they've gone. And it's not challenging anybody; it's not attractive to anybody, except for a fringe. And so, anyway, very, very encouraging that those churches that have stayed the course, preached the truth, stayed with the Bible, stayed with the written word, and are out doing things that take faith risk, they're the ones that are going to grow. So just, that is awesome. Well, Marcus, our time got away from us way too quickly here. And now I'm even going to extend this podcast a little bit. I wasn't planning on asking you this. This would be a great place to end it, but this is just too good. So I have to ask you this. But there's a number of people that obviously listen to this podcast that have read my book called To Contend. And you are quoted at length in that book. In fact, Marcus, your quote is longer than any other quote by any famous theologian in that book or anybody else in that book by a long shot, because I decided on the chapter 13 in the closing to put down your entire speech that you gave to a city council board, I believe it was. And anyway, we're wrapping up here, so we can't really dive into all the details of your story, but explain briefly what happened and what this speech was about. And then I think people will get an idea why I included the entire speech in the book called The Contend.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I was running Warriors for Christ, an organization at the time, and we would go out and do, preach the gospel at different events and go and take a stand outside drag queen story hours and things like that in our nation. And at the time when we, our first summer that we were like really going out and doing stuff, there was probably 20 or so drag queen story hours within our 45-minute radius.
Unbelievable. 20 of them and you weren't like in a huge city like Chicago or New York.
Yeah. Well, the Milwaukee greater area. So that was,
okay.
Yeah, that whole area, there was dozens of them. Sometimes we were trying to go to them to make a stand for Christ. And we would have to pick sometimes. There's two going on at once. Sometimes like only 20 minutes away from each other. We're like, all right, which one do we go to? Well, we're going to split up and you guys go there and we'll go there. That's how many were going on at this time. And what happened the day of the Watertown event that a lot of people have heard about and that you wrote about in the book was kind of towards the end of the summer. I believe it was like July 29th. We had a event that was going on in Watertown. It was going to be an all day pride event, and so it started in the morning, and they did drag queen story hours where they would read books to the children and stuff. And these were drag queens, men dressed as women, with fake things done to their body to make them look feminine, and to over sexualize them. And several of them were actually wearing lingerie out in front of like 3, 4, 5 year old kids. And then towards the end of the day, they had two different dance hours. So they did the story in the morning, and then they had this big stage where they actually danced in front of the children, and were doing like dances in front of them that were, I don't even want to describe it for the podcast. It was honestly horrific to have to.
It's disgusting and it's sexual. We can move on.
Yeah, and it was disgusting having to stand there and watch it. You hardly even know what to do, and you feel kind of helpless. And so, in that moment, I mean, even some of the kids were like giving them dollar bills as they were doing this dance hour and stuff. And so essentially, this thing is going on in the park, and they had a fence around the perimeter of the park. And so I took a friend's speaker and I started reading from the book of Galatians, which is about love, what true love is, because their whole mantra of their movement is love, and they've hijacked that term to use it for their own wicked ends. But I just started reading, here's what true love is, and the police force, which we found out later, one of the heads of the police force that day, his daughter actually put on the whole pride event. So separate from the morality of that, that's just a conflict of interest. Professionally, he should have removed himself, but he didn't. And so the police force, they came and they arrested me and didn't really give me any warning beforehand. And their two charges were resisting arrest, which anybody who's seen the video saw clearly that I did not do that. And then the second charge was amplification without a permit, which that's our right to free speech. There have been several Supreme Court cases over this, that in a public park, as long as you're not disturbing the peace, you're allowed to have amplification and you don't need a permit for it. But that's what they charged me with. And that was kind of the story of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then you give this speech again. Was it at a city council meeting?
Yeah, so that same city, Watertown, Wisconsin, that I think it was that next Tuesday, they were having a city council meeting, and there was going to be a lot of people there that day talking about what had happened at the park, and a lot of people who were concerned on both sides. There were a lot of leftists there, a lot of LGBTQ people there who wanted to have their voice heard and try to defend their quote unquote right to have these events. And then there were a lot of conservative Christians there who were like, yeah, we're going to try and take a stand against this. So I decided to, instead of cower back after being arrested, I was going to show up at the city council meeting and actually speak out myself. And so I went in and spoke and essentially just gave a Christian message of what the Christian worldview is, why we believe these things are immoral, why they're wrong, why they actually dehumanize your body. They actually warp your soul. And gave that speech, and that speech also, that clip went around a lot online, and people like Matt Walsh played on their show and stuff, and so that was good to see. That I think that's kind of the pushback we've been talking about with this generation, where you just take a stand like that, and courage begets courage. When other people take a stand like that, there are hundreds of more who thought the exact same thing you thought and believe that stand needs to be taken, but they were too scared to do it because they felt like they would be the only ones. And as soon as you do it, they see, oh, there's others out there like me. And then they are more emboldened to go out there and take a stand themselves.
Mm-hmm. And how old were you at the time?
I believe I was 19.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And like you said, rather than cowering, you basically, if I can just kind of like very concisely say this, you basically get arrested, leave jail, and then you march your way down within a few days down to the city council meeting and give this speech. Amen. That's what we need to be doing. The reason that the father of lies has so much sway in our culture, including our schools, government, broader culture, and sometimes even often actually creeping into the church, is because we haven't address the lies, meaning Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. We have the scriptures, we have the truth, we have Jesus, the truth. If we will just do what we're supposed to do as Christians, the enemy, the father of lies, Satan, would never have this kind of sway within our culture. So your whole speech is in my book called To Contend. Every chapter has practical stuff in it about how people can contend for the faith. And I love this podcast is because you've said so much today, Marcus, that has to do with contending for the faith. You are a walking contender. So, but I want to get, what's that?
I said, hopefully that's a good thing.
It is. Amen. And so, in the book, I talk about the biblical people that contended for the faith. So it's a very good thing. And yet, I just want to give you, Marcus, the final word here. Maybe you want to emphasize something we already talked about, or you want to give a parting challenge or whatever, but you get the final word.
Yeah. I think really with this moment, the question is, you look around at the nation, you see the civilizational collapse that you've talked about, you see the mass degeneracy and our culture fading away, our Christian culture completely slipping away. And the only question that really matters at this point is, what are you going to do about it? And what are you going to do to take a stand and actually leave an impact? Even think back 100 years ago, if our forefathers, if our grandfathers, our great grandfathers would have taken these kinds of stands, what kind of nation would we be living in right now? Don't have your great grandchildren ask, what would have happened? What kind of different nation would I be living in if only my grandparents would have done something different? If only they would have spoken out? If only they would have taken a stand for the truth? Don't let that be the question your children and your grandchildren ask of you. So do something that leaves a legacy for your children and your grandchildren, and take a stand for the faith. Like you said, contend for the faith, and be faithful to Christ in the midst of it all.
So good. Thanks for being with me today, Marcus. And thank you for being with us today on Insights. I look forward to being with you next time.